Hello and welcome to the Deaf Kiwi Diversity Series. We have a special event today, and that is that it has been 20 years since the NZSL bill. And we have invited two special guests today. Could you please introduce yourselves? My name is Jennifer Brain. I'm a retired New Zealander. Hello, my name is Kim. I'm from Whangarei. So first I would like to ask you about your sign names and where they are from. How were they given to you? I gave myself my sign name because at that time, that sign Jennifer Brain, I was working in the hostel at the deaf school as an RSW, a residential social worker. So I got in before the children did and decided that. And your sign name, where's that from? I went to boarding school, Van Ash in Christchurch, a long time ago. And when I arrived, I didn't know sign language at all. I was 11 years old. And I loved to read books. And when I was at boarding school, I would spend a lot of my time in the library. And at that time, the TC sign for library was like this. So when the students were asked, "Where's Kim?" they would say, "Library, library, library," like that. So it stuck. Lovely. Before we launch into the NZSL Act, I wanted to get a bit more of an understanding about what went on prior to that and what drove you to the NZSL Act. So what went on beforehand and where did the idea come from? Well, first I have to thank my husband for giving me some guidance. He was one of the first two deaf people that went from New Zealand over to the World Federation of the Deaf Congress, and it was really eye-opening for him. He was oral. He was mainstreamed himself, although he does have deaf family. So he went over to the WFD Congress in Bulgaria. And it really did open his eyes about, interpreters. He'd never seen them here, interpreters. And I didn't know how that all worked. And he saw many American and British people who were really well qualified, profoundly deaf and well qualified, and in many different fields, different areas. Some were teachers, professors, worked in dentistry, a lot of different spaces as those professionals. And it was this realization that there could be that achievement. So he mixed and mingled, learned more and more sign language. And even though he was, brought up oral, even though he did have a signing family. And there he was able to learn a lot. And he came back and he wrote a report. And he said it's really, really important for deaf children to have access to language. So that's in the report. Yeah, the report for the Deaf Association. He was one of the founders of the Deaf Association. And, we needed to learn more, and it was about a process and, how to advocate and what we needed to do. And one of his recommendations to the Deaf Association at that time was to bring some American experts over here so that we could learn from them. And in order for them to be able to help us, at that time it was NZ Association of the Deaf, it was called, but to help them with a strategy for the future. So actually 3 men did come over. All 3 were doctors, 2 were deaf and 1 was a coder. The coder, he was a son of deaf adults. And all of them could speak and sign. So they came and they gave NZAD kind of a step-by-step in New Zealand Association of the Deaf that was the first name the association had. So at that time, there was a lot of advocating as an organisation because there was no other service for deaf, and so that they were it. And, coders were acting as interpreters and helping in court settings and, in different situations. So those three people came over and they were all professors. One was in education, different areas, and they came over and they looked around and they saw that we were starting off as an organisation to move, and we didn't know which way to go. And one of the areas of focus was sign language. So we kind of thought, we'll make a start in sign language. We needed to look at the tutor space. We needed to develop a dictionary. We needed to advocate for the language. So that was one of our goals, and it's in our constitution. We were the guardians of the language. So we wanted to protect it. So they were leading us step by step, but really some of us had probably started, before that with talking with one another and talking about deaf children's needs and about access to language. And, not all children were oral, and they have a right to language because language is the key to learning. So that was part of the research in New Zealand. Yes, and they helped us to develop a strategy for the future in terms of advocating and making things happen for deaf people here in New Zealand. So we started really from those three professionals. Well, things started off prior to that. There were a lot of different deaf clubs and deaf people coming together because they knew, that there was so much missing in our lives and there were so many barriers. There was a lack of education, a lack of support after we left school. A lot of things that we were missing. So the clubs were good for socialisation. Auckland Deaf Society had a welfare person there, but they wanted more than that. And so deaf people, all together, first of all, there were actually hearing people there, and the hearing people tried to control what was needed for the future. And in the end, we kind of shooed them off. So it was deaf people needing to make those decisions about their futures, not the hearing people. So that was kind of the foundation of the movement. That's amazing. I would love to unpack that more, that particular area, and to find those people. There are only two left, my husband and Mary Johnson. All the others have gone. Well, I'll need to catch them one day. So in terms of the NZSL bill, what was your involvement in the bill? My involvement was more advocacy and trying to visit MPs to advocate for the language. And that happened really before we had any kind of proper, we had some guidelines, but we hadn't established anything. We had to do that first. So we needed funding. So we advocated, not only me, there was a group of us, deaf people, in Auckland. He was younger, Kim was younger. So Christchurch and Wellington as well. And so all started to lobby. And then we kind of realised that we needed to establish, the dictionary and some other things that we needed to do as well. So Kim, what was your involvement in the NZSL Act? Well, when I came back to New Zealand, there were really no sign, like there wasn't any kind of activity happening. You know, yes, we had deaf clubs, but not really at a community level. There were barriers within education. And I moved up to Auckland, and I was working for an organisation there which supported people who had disabilities in the community. And there was somebody had been in fielding and had moved from Lake Alice Hospital out into the community and didn't have any language, couldn't read or write. He was still a human being, but he hadn't been able to access what he needed to. He wanted to get his motorbike license. He was really determined, but he couldn't sit the written test. And so did a bit of cheeky advocating for him in order for him to get his motorbike license, and he did get it. And then what really was impacting for me was that I received a letter about going to undertake jury service myself, and actually, it was one of the first interpreters there in Auckland was Kay Bird, who came along with me, and Megan Mansfield. And we went to court, and I actually got selected to sit on the jury. And I was asked to step out because the judge needed to have a conversation about me being there. And so with the interpreters there in the room, well, basically the law said that there was only a maximum of 12 allowed. So plus the interpreters being there and myself, you know, the numbers were too many. So I had to step down. And so where were my rights within that? They'd been taken away. And, you know, really deaf people can work as jurors. For example, after that, David McKee served, and also he was the chair of the jury at that time, which was a great achievement. So that was after the NZSL Act, you know, after we'd been recognised to have an NZSL as an official language. The court had to accept that, but prior to then they hadn't. And secondly, what was impacting for me was Ivan Curry. He grew up in Whangarei, and my neighbour was his first cousin. So I knew a bit about what had happened there. And so it was hugely impacting because he never got the right to have access to his language. There was always somebody else speaking for him, writing for him, and he would just nod. He just wanted to get it over with. So really, he was remanded in custody for 2 years. Wow. And when he met another deaf person who told him the story, you know, he thought he'd been in prison for stealing a car. He didn't know that it was regarding a baby's death. So 2 years, it took 2 years for him to find out the truth, and it wasn't him, it was somebody else. Somebody else did something, blamed him, and he didn't have any rights at that stage, and realised that a similar thing was happening with other deaf people as well. And at that point, I joined NZAD, as it was at that time, the Deaf Association, NZAD, New Zealand Association of the Deaf, was the first name, as you said. And was it before then? Trisha Fitzgerald, was it before? Frida was involved in that case. Yes, it was Frida. Frida was around somewhere, so Frida was involved in the case. And I had some interest in what the board was doing, and so I got involved there. And there was some pressure for NZSL to become an official language. There was a meeting, and that really caught my attention. So what happened was, you know, obviously after what happened with the jury service and with Ivan, and, you know, then I started focusing on that space in terms of advocacy through NZAD. I've got one question to ask of both of you in terms of the official language and what that means. So it's recognition through law of New Zealand Sign Language as a language of deaf people. It's not just that, though. There's more than that, right? We hoped that, in becoming law, yes, that would happen through the Act, but that there would be more access, more development for deaf people, more access to many things, whether it be education, work, courts. The courts were a big issue. They were obviously using coders, or a mother of a deaf child. Some of them were good. Some of them really didn't have enough language. I mean, some of them, sometimes they were using teachers of the deaf who were oral for a full signer. So there were a lot of situations that we were hoping might, be mentioned in law and where that would be enforced. It would, force government to support development of interpreters in those spaces. Do you have anything to add? Yeah. The health situation is critical for deaf people. As a deaf person, we need to be able to make our own choice. And choices about, not those choices being made by another person on our behalf. So I need to be able to decide for myself what's going on. And as Jennifer said, some were good, some weren't. So, for example, my mother came along with me as a deaf child to the doctor. And at that time, just kind of sat there twiddling my thumbs. And when it was all over, I said, "What happened?" And she said, "I'll tell you later, I'll tell you later, I'll tell you later." She never told me. But sometimes the deaf child was actually an adult themselves, and the mother would go along, and the mother would still make the decision about their adult child's operation or not. So we were hoping that, that we would then be allowed to make our own decisions. But in order to make decisions, we need the information. And how do we get the information? Through New Zealand Sign Language. So that is powerful. That's why the NZSL bill was established, to help, the future in those settings. And to challenge the courts if they do bring someone who's not qualified in to interpret, to sign for a deaf person. Really, there have been cases where people didn't have those rights met. It's like, "Oh, you're a naughty boy. You stole something. Naughty." But that's not an adult's way, is it? Deaf people have the right to, to be proven guilty through proper processes or proven not guilty. But they need to have the information in order to be able to respond. And so that was one area, plus education. Education, we're not there yet. Yes, and the getting penalised because of the behaviours of somebody else as well. Somebody else did that. It wasn't myself. And here I am. Yeah, wow. A lot of stories, I'm sure, as well, that would evidence that, right? Yeah. Yeah. But really, the New Zealand Sign Language Act was not the first thing. The first thing was the community language. The community? So what's the difference? Community language? So meaning that there were different people here living in New Zealand, the Chinese and people from India. So different races within the community who use sign language and, different groups of deaf people. And so the first step was, accepting this as a community language, and then the recommendation that went to government happened, but they did nothing with that. So, needed to push harder for the New Zealand Sign Language Act. And so we're really grateful for that happening, because that really was really the driver, wasn't it? Wow. Yeah, so, we needed to really think about the dictionary and get that moving. And, think about the sign language tutor space. There were a lot of things that were all interconnected. Yeah, a lot of things that were happening in 2006. The dictionary was before then, right? Yeah, that did start before then. And then just step by step, a lot of achievements that led up to 2006. Wow. I think that the dictionary started 2001. No, it must have been before that. It was before that. Pat Dugdale was alive. I've got all the information in this book here. So this book, Talking Hands, Listening Eyes, is really a history of the Deaf Association, or Deaf Aotearoa New Zealand, as it is called now. But it also does include other things that led up to that point. So yeah, a lot of areas in terms, links to sign language, interpreters, leadership within this book. But really a lot did happen prior to this from the NZAD, and obviously a lot more afterwards. The bill went through Parliament. We asked for cross-party support, so meaning all of the parties joining in. But there were one or two of the parties who were a little resistant because they were worried about the costs of the bill. They were worried about the cost and what would happen in the future. So that's why I think it was limited. It really needed to be broader than it was. Wow. So really your vision was that it would be education and justice, everything. It's all about access. Kim and I, we like different things. And so I don't want to just kind of focus on that because someone says that's all that is available. I want to be allowed to follow my dreams and what I want. I'd like to ask, in terms of your vision, of it being wider, what could that look like? Like, for example, if education had been in scope, you might, like Whangarei has a group and, it might look like a mainstream class, but having an interpreter there as well, and still having a teacher of the deaf in the background, but that the teacher is there, the hearing teacher carries on as they would in the classroom, but you've got like different working groups where the teacher of the deaf can help out with English and maths and things like that. So that would be more inclusive. So that's not what we have, an inclusive enough education system in New Zealand, really. That's one area. A few years ago, there was an organisation I was involved in called Deaf Action New Zealand, and we made a petition to government to really try and get New Zealand health rights recognised, because we need access to health, doctors, medical professionals, about ourselves, and access hasn't been good. So government agencies, yes, but specific to making it happen in terms of, which one, no. So yes, you've got courts, but not educational health recognised within the Act. But the bill does make government agencies accountable in a way, but it's still weak. It's still weak. And it's still weak today, and particularly in the health space. So government at that time didn't really accept, New Zealand Sign Language as a health right, and there's more work that needs to be achieved there. Deaf people are still missing out on, when it comes to medical appointments, medical emergencies. I think that for me, I have found Whangarei Hospital really good. They ask me if I need an interpreter, and I say yes. But there are no interpreters available. And I think that part of the problem is that it's a small town and there's not enough work for an interpreter. And then it would be about paying them. Interpreters get paid job by job, so that would mean interpreters not earning enough. So I think really we need to look at employing a full-time interpreter, even if they're not working full-time because the work's not available, paying them a living wage, so that we've always got them if something happens. I think that's part of the problem in Whangarei, but it's nationwide really. Yeah, you've had better experiences at Whangarei Hospital than me. I've found them useless many times. I've failed to book interpreters when interpreters are available. They'll tell me that interpreter's not available, but I know that they're there. With the New Zealand Sign Language Dictionary, that's a really important part of the bill. So why was it so important? Well, first we needed proof of the language. So, the dictionary is a tool for people to be able to access or, teaching and learning. And it's always important to have the language accessible, like to have, the Cambridge Dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary in terms of English. And NZSL being a growing language, there was more that could be done there, in terms of books and videos and, more development there in terms of people being able to access resources. So you need to be able to have something there rather than have nothing in terms of resource. And we needed a reference point as well. I'm not quite sure if I've explained this clearly, but we needed something tangible to show that this was a language, officially. And so when the Deaf Association decided that they were going to go ahead and develop the dictionary, we had a man from America by the name of Dr. David Stewart. And he told us that we needed to keep control of the language wherever it was to go and wherever it was to develop. So then we talked with Victoria University, because the man there, who was head of English language department, he was sympathetic, really, to New Zealand Sign Language. And so we spoke with him, and then they agreed to start the process. And I think that it was Sir Roy Mackenzie, who provided funding for the start of that and the establishment of the dictionary committee. But before even we went that far, we had a meeting with people from all over New Zealand. We met at Wellington Airport. All of us came, representatives, from different deaf clubs, to talk about what we were wanting to include in the dictionary. So they wanted swear words and medical phrases and different things. Anything that we had needed to go in the dictionary. And then we set up different groups. So there were 4 different areas in terms of, signs that they used in those areas, different words, different vocab, for them all to go in. It was kind of pre-organisation at that stage. And then we signed a memorandum of agreement with Victoria University. Obviously it was our language, but, we're giving them permission to develop it. And then it changed from being under the English language department. Oh no, they changed their name to linguistics department. And so obviously that included New Zealand Sign Language. So, yeah, can you think of anything else? Yes, with the dictionary, it was how words were used in the community as well. There used to be a TV program every Sunday at 1:00 in the afternoon called News Review. And that was Megan Mansfield and another woman as well from Christchurch. Yes. Who was that? Ava? Ava. Yes, it was. She was involved. And they were signing. And that was like the first exposure, really, on TV. And I lived in a small town just in Blenheim, where there was not really much around, but there was the sign language on TV, and I took it all in. But it wasn't regular, so I couldn't just kind of check what a sign was or anything like that. And there were other influences as well that were quite impacting, and there was pressure to try and, get us to accept TC, like Australian signs and Australasian signs, and we kind of didn't want any of that. Yeah, it was quite interesting. So did you enjoy the TV news thing? Was that really worthwhile? Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it was interesting. The interesting thing about TC is that the Deaf Association had a hearing president at that time who was a coder. And he encouraged the committee to accept TC, firstly, because it was in terms of children's access to language and education in school. But some of us were a little hesitant about that. Yes, we wanted children to have access, but some of the signs were like, watch me, would be signed like this, watch me. So that was the TC sign. It's like, where's the meaning in that? Plus, when I arrived at Van Ash, there were no courses. There was nothing there in order for me to learn sign language. So I just had to learn from the other boarding students teaching me sign language. And even though they use TC at school, yeah, it was that smoothness. And at that time, we just kind of had to grin and, just kind of pretend that we were happy with what the teacher said. And I'd say, I am going to the toilet. Thank you. Yeah, but, if I was just talking to other students, I'd just sign it smoothly in NZSL. So talking about the comparisons, thinking about 20 years ago, when the bill, when we became an official language finally, to now, do you feel that the bill has achieved a lot of things? I think that it has achieved acceptance more acceptance. I wouldn't say we've got full acceptance. There are still groups out there like doctors when it comes to cochlear implants and the focus on speech and a child, might kind of get one in 5 years old. It doesn't work for them still. And, I think it's criminal, really. It really is quite criminal. I'm not saying that, cochlears, they can't have cochlears, but they need to be able to access both, both opportunities for them. Acceptance of who they are as deaf people. We're all human at the end of the day. I think maybe we've missed some opportunities over the 20 years. We need to push more. What are your thoughts about the last 20 years, Kim? We've got a long way to go. 20 years ago, it was almost like a seed was planted and, a plant kind of was raised up through the soil, and it's about kind of watering that seed and seeing the growth over that time. But we do still have a lot of work to do in order to achieve what we need to for our language being more accepted. For example, on TV, it was a good opportunity during the COVID times. And that was kind of, a huge exposure to our language for a lot of people. And even people who are hard of hearing who were watching the interpreters on screen, they found it easier to follow what was being talked about rather than just have to rely on lip reading. They had access to the interpreters, so it was helpful for them. And also helpful for people to kind of learn a sign or two and then practice what they'd seen. And because it was a regular everyday thing, that was good. And, now we have the Prime Minister and MPs standing up, giving media briefings to the public, and there's often an interpreter there so that deaf people can see what's going on as well. Plus, it's used in Parliament on the big screen. Yeah, so we do still need full access to Parliament, because they're making laws about things that affect us. So a lot of the time, deaf people we miss the boat. We have missed opportunities because we don't have access to, through the language in the first place. Thank you both so much for your experiences that you have shared. And thank you for watching this series. And please note that part 2 is coming. And that's going to be about the legal process of the New Zealand Sign Language Act. So watch this space. Goodbye. Thank you so much.